Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, I'm not sure if any of you realized, but over the weekend, yesterday, April 11th, 2021, there were a rash of demonstrations around the country. Well, I shouldn't say demonstrations because they were largely flops, but we'll get to that in a moment. That were titled "White Lives Matter" rallies. Now, we knew about this about a week ago. There were people who allegedly announced that they were going to have these sort of White Lives Matter rallies. But everyone was scared, concerned, and then now we realize that as Sunday came along, some of these rallies were actually planned by anti-fascists. In fact, the New York rally was actually planned entirely by anti-fascist advocates to capture white supremacists, whereas some were actually legitimately planned by white supremacists, but as this article from MSNBC says, no one showed up. The only few notable events from this occurrence were the unlawful assembly at Huntington Beach, which, again, most of the people there were not White Lives Matter supporters. Most of the folks there were anti-Klan demonstrators, BLM supporters, Trump supporters. Most people there were not there for the cause that these rallies were intended to advocate for. But, I began thinking to myself, just the sheer difference of White Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter, because when you have two things that sound phonetically similar, you think in yourself, okay, are these things the same? And it is my contention, my friends, that while there are practical and material differences between White Lives Matter, which I do believe is a racist, vile slogan, and Black Lives Matter, which I do believe the participants do not believe is a racist or vile slogan, but it may very well be a racist slogan if we can get a certain definition of racism down and past our preconceptions. While there are very clear material and practical differences, I do think, in principle, both of these terms have a lot more in common than people would like to admit. Let me make this very clear. I am not trying to say that the goals of White Lives Matter, which is simply, again, a rhetorical construction created by white supremacists, are the goals of Black Lives Matter. That is not my argument, and I would never say that. Many of the issues that Black Lives Matter talks about are very important issues, I think. Police brutality is a very important issue. But my difference between me and Black Lives Matter is that I don't see police brutality as a race issue. I see it as an issue of abuse, as an issue of a complex, a mentality. I don't see racial disparities as a race issue. I see them as the consummate sum of a variety of factors that may go into whatever disparity was happening at that time. I don't see all of these things in society as race issues. The race essentialism of Black Lives Matter is what I disagree with. But regardless, I think a lot of the issues that the group tries to talk about, even if they talk about it in a flawed way, are important issues in the abstract. White Lives Matter is this entire construction of racial, white genocide, and all this nonsense that makes no sense at all, the browning of America, all this racist, alt-right nonsense. And yes, I am being dismissive, because in my opinion, if you're going to make these outrageous claims that are not scientific, I should be able to dismiss you. Right? What is Hitchens' Rager? I can dismiss an extraordinary claim if it does not have extraordinary evidence. But, again, in principle, I do think there is a similarity between White Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter. And let me explain this to you. Both groups presume that race is the condition by which they should value social interactions. Let me say this again. Both ideologies presume that race is the condition by which they should value social interactions, and let me even add an addendum to that: social epistemology, how we understand society through the development of knowledge. That's all epistemology is, the process of understanding and obtaining knowledge. When you have a group that says Black Lives Matter, and then they view all of the occurrences in America that may involve race or may have something to do with race either by osmosis or by proximity, through race, you have a group that is essentializing race as a dominant factor of understanding the world. And when you do that, you omit the inherent and divine complexity of the world. You omit the inherent and even disparate complexity of social interactions. You have this sort of emaciated idea of the human individual, that we are driven primarily by one thing, that may be controlled primarily by one thing. And what I mean is that in the case of Black Lives Matter, we are driven, race basically influences a lot of our interactions. And the one thing that race is controlled by are these systems of power that Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, and company talk about. These sort of systems of power that manifest these disparities, that manifest marginalization, that manifest all of this stuff, according to the theory. Whereas with White Lives Matter, they are also essentializing race by saying, okay, white people are being discriminated against, white people are under attack. So they enshrine the same kind of victim mentality that is endemic to some racial movements on the left, and they say, okay, this cultural genocide, we have to fight against it, and we have to make sure that white folks are defended. But again, they are essentializing things. The white supremacists like to essentialize immigration. White supremacists like to believe that because brown folks come into America, their culture goes away. But in all reality, this has a few flaws. Number one, there is no white culture. There's not even a black culture, in my opinion. There's not even a black culture. There are certain practices that are incidentally associated with certain races, but not inherent to them. When we say black culture or white culture, it casts the idea of culture being inherent to race, and it is not. It is a distinct, separate thing. That's number one. Number two, it presumes that there is an active, again, systemic, power dynamic going on here that is attempting to eliminate white people. Again, if you believe that immigration and the browning of America is a bad thing and that it is engaging in a cultural genocide, these are not my words. These are the words from white supremacists. If you genuinely believe that, then you believe that viewpoint necessitates a sort of systemic action to undertake what you view as a bad thing. So again, both the Black Lives Matter crowd and the white supremacist crowd both think that there are systems of oppression attacking them, both essentialize race. So I have now drawn two similarities between these people. And again, these are all principal similarities. These are all theoretical similarities. I'm not going to say that practically they're fighting for the same thing, because they're not. And that would be stupid to say. I pride myself at being an inquisitive mind, not a bomb-throwing, red meat giving mind. They're not the same thing practically. But in principle, my friends, when you essentialize race, you get similar conclusions, regardless of what race you're essentializing. And all essentializing means is that you view race as the sole factor or the primary factor, the domineering factor of social interactions. You view the entire world through race. So those are the two similarities. They believe in the systems of power, and they also essentialize race. The third one is the sort of, and this is kind of implicit in essentializing race. Both perspectives, both the Black Lives Matter perspective and the White Lives Matter perspective, omit the individual. Both perspectives omit the individual. And this is part of, kind of dumbing down or deriding or getting rid of the divine complexity of reality. The individual is the unit by which social understanding takes place. Even if the concepts the individual interacts with are concepts that are objectively and universally true, we are still, without us, without you as an individual, without us, how can we understand the world? That's not to say that we need everyone to understand the world. That's simply to say that our beings, our understanding of the world, does not simply come from us being inside of a group. It comes from our ability to reason. And one's capacity to reason is ultimately an individual quality that one has to activate, one has to hone, one has to prod towards the best conclusion, because we can only reason with the concepts we have at our disposal. And if we don't have the concept of individualism and autonomy at our disposal, but only the concepts of racial essentialism at our disposal, then guess what happens? Our reason becomes dim, and it becomes more of a eisegetical process as opposed to an exegetical process. An eisegetical process is simply a process in which you read your own interpretations into the world, whereas an exegetical process is one in which you analyze the process for what it is. My friends, Black Lives Matter and White Lives Matter are both exegetical processes. They don't analyze the process of race and society and the dynamics for what they are. They read into it. Let's stop reading into things, my friends. There is a world that exists objectively. There are universal laws that exist objectively. There are rights that you have as a human being. And all of these things need not be codependent on what level of melanin is in your skin or what color you are. Your culture need not be codependent on what you look like. My friends, simply take back conceptual authority over your own life and stop giving stock to these broad generalizations. Recognize issues in society as very important. Police brutality is an important issue. Trust me, it's a very important issue. And so are many other issues. But recognize them for what they are, not what we want them to be. And in the case of some people, it's a racially based thing. Immigration is very important. But recognize immigration for what it is, not what we want it to be. Because for some people, it's also a racially based issue. If we liberate ourselves from this essentialized quality, I think we'll be able to have a better perspective of the world, regardless of what we think, who we think about, and what we order our passions toward. I genuinely believe you guys have the potential to have the kind of world we need simply to have proper understanding. Think about it. As always, my friends, I love you, and please, if you would be so obliged, please donate to me on Patreon, patreon.com/officialcwatson. But until next time, my friends, please stay pensive. Bye-bye.